Good morning. Welcome to another session on environmental impact assessment.
Unit 5 Case Studies. Course outcome: describe the EIA for various infrastructure projects. Learning outcomes: explain the EIA for highways and bridges. Specific outcomes: explain the impacts of highway construction and operation on the environment. So, we have seen some of the impacts, right? So, we'll continue from wherever we left in the last part. So, in the indirect linear impacts, we have seen up to water balance, right? So, we'll start from here. So, reduce safety due to risk of accidents. More serious and more frequent accidents may be caused by the higher speeds that become possible after road development, by inexperienced drivers, by pedestrians and animals crossing roads, and by the absence of parallel route for slow moving traffic. So, road building should therefore always be accompanied by or prepared for by instruction in road safety and monitoring and inspection of monitoring and inspection of vehicles for safety, right? So, road buildings should therefore always be accompanied by or prepared for by instruction in road safety and monitoring and inspection of vehicles for safety. So, the there should be some there are some safety rules to be followed. So when that safety rules are not followed, it leads to a lot of accidents. So careful monitoring and inspection should be there for the rules to be followed for the vehicles. Effects on settled population in towns and villages. Existing towns and villages are normally too densely built up to allow the building of a direct through road. If such a road is built, nevertheless, the detrimental effects it will have are noise, vehicle exhaust emissions, and a greater risk of accidents. However, even with the effects of this kind caused by more intensive land use, the density of building often rises in such areas, with attendant environmental impacts in the fields of, amongst others, hydrology and local climate. If an attempt is made to stop such effects by building a bypass, mature existing social structures are often damaged or destroyed, and new buildings soon spring up along the bypass, though these can be prevented from having any detrimental impacts by proper environmental planning. So, here what we are saying is that due to the laying of the roads, what happens to the settlements or populations which are lying in the neighboring towns and villages, right? So you will have a lot of noise, vehicle exhaust emissions, and greater risk is accidents, right? Why? Because when you do build bypass, right, slowly some settlements start coming even along the bypass roads, right? That's what they're saying, right? So new buildings spring up along the bypass, and but they can be prevented if you are having proper environmental planning. Detrimental impact of lack of maintenance. A road that is not maintained will not last. As I said in the last half, that in India, maintenance of roads is not so good, right? So a suitable technical design for the road and good quality building work will serve to keep down the amount of maintenance needed, at least in the first few years. However, at that stage, maintenance work will certainly need to be done, and if it is not, the damage and adverse impacts described above will inevitably ensue, right? Coming to the consequential impacts. So, building noise, where the volume of works involved is small and the techniques employed are simple, building noise is only a minor consideration in road building, right? Reuse of bitumen. When the time comes to replace bituminous carriageways pavements, the binder should be recovered from the old pavement courses. Where the pavement is relatively thin, the old pavement will normally be needed to improve the load bearing capacity, and it is impossible for it to be reused, right? So when the pavement is very thin, old pavements, you need to improve the old pavements, and in that case it is difficult to reuse the bitumen. Seismic damage. In the event of earthquakes, roads having only a few simple structures along their routes will be far less susceptible to damage than ones with more complicated, highly engineered structures. Fissures and slips in the earthworks will be limited too due to the smaller dimensions. So if the roads have only a few structures like bridges, small bridges and small tunnels, the impact of seismic effect will be less, seismic damage effect will be less. But if you have a lot of complicated high engineering structures, like very high-fi bridges and so on, obviously the impact will be very heavy, and damage also will be very heavy. Beneficial impacts, some additional measures with beneficial environmental impacts which can be taken in the course of road building are as follows. Retention basins for the population, drinking troughs for livestock can be created by raising the vertical alignment of road at water courses. Borosates can be developed into biotops, amenity ponds, where roads passing through villages are paved, and if there is an unpaved market place, the road paving can be extended to include it. In the course of the building work, preparations can be made at points where material is borrowed to ensure that sufficient material will be available for maintaining the road. The road can be used as a fire break to stop large fires. Erosion control can be improved, especially in the course of maintenance. Analysis and evaluation of the environmental impacts, binding universal guidelines for any complex analysis of the many and diverse aspects of the possible environmental impacts generated by the building of roads do not exist. And given the many different sites there are the problems, it would be virtually impossible for them to be satisfactorily drafted. So there are no universal guidelines for these things, right? Even the evaluation criteria developed by German conditions have so far proved impossible to define in quantifiable terms. Except that for the criteria for noise emission and emission of harmful air pollutants. In view of the number of variables that there are, any ranking assigned to possible alternatives will continue to be largely subjective. The only answer to this problem is more thorough planning, which brings out particular critical issues with greater clarity. Preliminary regional planning and a detailed feasibility study, including a comparable evaluation of all adverse and beneficial impacts, may therefore be useful way of obtaining the information needed for assessing the widespread effects of a road building program. An advanced study of this kind will be made at an early stage, and it is at this stage that a check should always be made to see whether the alignment corridors are suitable with the provision that corrective measures still to be defined are carried out, or they are not suitable. For this purpose, it will be necessary to draw up appropriate maps of protected areas, plans of the natural landscape, geological surveys, registers of land used for agriculture and forestry, and maps of forests and woodlands, survey of hydrological resources, and master building plans to define the possible alignment corridors and to evaluate alternate possibilities by process of comparison. So here what they are saying is that sometimes you may build a road, along a particular corridor, but creating a lot of impacts. Right, so you need to check whether it is suitable or not suitable, or it is suitable with some corrective measures to be taken. So for this, you need to look through various maps like the land use map, the the agricultural map, the forestry map, water resources map, to see if there are any rivers which are going through that, or building plans. Right, then only you can define the proper alignment corridor. Corridor meaning the pathway through which the roads are being built, or you will have to look at some alternative possibilities by means of comparison. The measures that will be taken to blend the road into the nature and the landscape through which is to be realistically shown and described in words of a special drawing. Right. After a comparison appraisal of the possible alternatives, all the details of these measures should be worked out and incorporated in the design drawings. Right, with a scale of 1:2000 to 1:500 with appropriate detailed drawings. Where it proves virtually impossible in the different planning phases for harmful factors to be quantified in relation to evaluation criteria and standards arrived at by analysis, or ones for which standard procedures are defined, then qualitative approaches to evaluation may be successfully adopted. If you are not able to make a quantitative evaluation, then you have to make a qualitative evaluation. Right, quantitative evaluation is in terms of numbers. Qualitative evaluation is saying whether it's good or bad, or moderate, something like that. That is qualitative evaluation. Interaction with other sectors, there are number of references, right, where the there is interaction that exists with the road traffic sector. So there are also close relationships with projects in the field of rural village and urban development, particularly with regard to the development effects that follow on from the road building. The benefit to road users conflicts with the interests of those using the land occupied by the road and its close and more distant environs. There are in particular conflicts for agricultural or forestry reasons. So the major conflict for this sector is the agricultural sector or the forest sector. Questions to be considered in this case are not simply the actual land occupied, but also the functional disruption that the road building causes to the existing or in some cases sensitive systems. Right, for example, the disruption caused by the road crossing irrigated rice growing land, the heavier felling of commercial timber now that transportation is easier, the erosion caused by different farming methods adopted for new crops made more attractive by transportation, and the greater mobility and production levels encouraged by easier access to market. Right. So what we are saying is that because there is some development or some technological upgradation in agriculture field, they may be looking for faster modes of transportation of the agricultural goods. So in that way also it is linked. Impacts encouraging the growth of trade and industry which would not have occurred without the new road are generated in the same way. Finally, there are often reciprocal impacts with road building project generates with respect to the other impending infrastructural projects. Example, where a building of an earthen dam in a remote region cannot go ahead until access facilities exist. The commercial activities triggered by building of the road will create a need for the disposal of wastewater and solid waste. The use of fertilizer as a result of recently built road will create stress on the environment that did not exist previously. Right. So as a result of construction of the road, there are some reciprocal effects or impacts. So road building projects summary: road building projects result in the opening up of regions that were difficult or impossible to access previously, or they at least improve conditions of movement of the existing routes. This being the case, it is inevitable that they will always interfere with the natural situation in a region. As well as this presence related impact, there is also an operating impact due to the traffic the roads carry, and over and above that, there will be a direct and indirect impetuses for changes to take place in the socio-cultural and socio-economic status quo. The variety of different questions that arise from this complex pattern is enormous, and they all need to be considered in the course of carrying out a road building project. What this means is that each individual project must be treated as a special case, in that the weight attached to the different environmental impacts of greater or lesser seriousness may vary and will thus have to be reassessed in each individual case. The object in making a summary assessment of a road building project is to minimize the stresses on the environment in the primary areas of soil protection, noise control, preservation of the clean air, water, etc., and also to preserve or reshape the natural environment by means of building work specific to the project or in parallel with the major importance being attached to the alignment which fits as neatly as possible into the natural environment. Right. So this is the major objective of making a summary assessment of a road building project. Thank you.
Thus, we come to the end of this session. Thank you for your participation. Looking forward to meeting you in the next session.